Hi, this is Chris with firstcenturychristianity.net. Today I have a bit of a sobering sea story to tell you called Closing the Hatch, a very sobering story from the Navy that equates to the Bible. Out of high school, I joined the U.S. Navy, and which really helped me kickstart my life and gave me a good career. And the Navy is a little bit different than the ground forces. The ground forces train to take the fight to the enemy, the Army and the Marines, and the Air Force, and they train to go out and do damage and to never leave a man behind. I suppose in modern parlance, we should switch that to a person because we do have women in combat today, and I just showed you my age. It's a little bit on the old side there. Um, and so the Navy and the Coast Guard have another facet to that. We all train to never leave anyone behind, except for the Navy and the Coast Guard, where we have some exceptions to that. At some point, you do have to leave people behind. Navy, for sure, I know, we train in boot camp to be able to stop the ship from flooding. We have to save the ship. And you may have seen this in movies or whatnot, where somebody has to close the hatch on their friend in order to save the ship. It's a very awful thing to contemplate, and it is something that the Navy is very conscious about, and you learn from a very young age not only the ability to kill your enemy, but in order to save the ship, you may have to actually kill your own friends by closing a hatch on them and having them drowned. And what you see on the screen right now is a picture of the USS Fitzgerald, where this actually happened. The USS Fitzgerald was in a collision in the open ocean quite a few years ago, and I've always wondered how could that possibly happen. So when the after action report was declassified and made public, I read it and came to the part where they had to actually do that. Where the berthing is where Navy people sleep when they're at sea. When the berthing was flooded, there were some shipmates who started grabbing people and throwing them up a ladder in the darkness, and they were saving people and saving people. And then they climb up and they're reaching in to save people from the water as the water is rising. And they know they didn't get everybody out. And they ultimately had to close that hatch. They had to shut the hatch on their friends. It could have been people that they'd known for 4 or 5 years, that they've been in combat with, that they've been friends with. It could have been their best man or on their wedding. And in order to save the ship, they actually had to close the hatch. And when I read that, I stopped and said they actually had to do it. And it kind of bothered me because it's something that I was trained to do at the ripe old age of 18 that I never thought was going to happen. Praise Yahweh that it did not happen to me, but the men and women of that ship who had to close hatches on their friends to save the ship will have to live with that decision for the rest of their lives. So you may wonder, how does this apply to the Bible? Well, last week's Torah portion, there's a line in Genesis 7:16. After everybody got on the ark and it started raining, Yahweh closed the hatch. Yahweh closed the hatch on his creation. How hard must that have been for him to stand there as the rain was coming down, knowing that everybody and everything that was not on the ark was about to die? In order for good to prevail, Yahweh had to actually close the hatch on his beloved creation. That's a very sobering thought, and it ties into the New Testament. As in Romans 5:7-8, for one will hardly die for a righteous man, though perhaps for the good man someone would dare even to die. But God demonstrates his own love toward us in that while we were sinners, Christ died for us. And then Hebrews 9:13 through 15. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer sprinkling those who have been defiled sanctify for the cleansing of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living God? For this reason, he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that since a death has taken place for the redemption of the transgressions that were committed under the first covenant, those who have been called may receive the promise of eternal inheritance. In the first century, Yeshua closed the hatch on himself. He decided to die to bear our iniquity, to bear our sins, and a death really took place. God, Yahweh, the eternal, he can't die. So he sent his son to come into the world to die on behalf of mankind so that our sins could be forgiven. Yeshua took the brunt of the punishment that we deserve, and he took it on himself, and he died innocently to be resurrected by God 3 days and 3 nights later. That's pretty important information, don't you think? I think so. That in Genesis, Yahweh closed the hatch on creation, and in the New Testament, Yeshua closed the hatch on himself to give creation a second chance, an opportunity for salvation. Now, in the book of Revelation, there's a couple of lines here. Revelation 22:10 through 11. He said to me, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is near. Let the one who does wrong still do wrong, and the one who is filthy still be filthy, and let the one who is righteous still practice righteousness, and the one who is holy still keep himself holy. This is talking about a moment in time in the future, probably the not too distant future, where that hatch is going to get closed again. Now, what's important to understand is the decision to flood the earth and destroy everything above the water was made decades before it started raining. Noah and his family were called to be saved before it started raining. After the decision was made to destroy the earth, there were at least 50 years where people were born, raised, married, and given in marriage. It's the days of Noah. Those people were never going to have a chance. And Yahweh knew they weren't going to have a chance. He knew they were going to be born wicked because he lives outside of time. So the end of the days of this era, Olam Hazeh, is this world. Olam Haba is the world to come. The end of time has been decreed from the creation of the world. Yahweh knows when he is going to destroy all of mankind. He knows when he's going to bring this age to an end. That decision was made more than 5,000 years ago. That moment in time is sealed before it ever happens. So when that day comes, which side of the hatch do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the ark, or do you want to be on the earth? Because you have a choice to make. And that choice is to be made right now, whether the end of the world comes tomorrow or 100 years from now. Your time of decision as to which side of the hatch you're going to be on is right now. Thank you for listening to this message. May Yahweh bless you and keep you in the name of his son, Yeshua.